Hi everyone, and welcome back. In this video we're talking about astrology, and in particular our approach to astrology.
Well, our approach to astrology and the physics of astrology.
Absolutely.
And how they actually work, because I don't think a lot of people really understand that. Because there's, you've got people talking about Vedic astrology, Western astrology, visual astrology, and differences in them.
Mm.
Okay. Now, I want to make something clear. I know people that work visual astrology. I don't have a problem with it. I have a problem with some of the modern takes on visual astrology.
Okay.
My mentor, as far as astrology is concerned, his name was Win. His name was Winrow, who has passed. He used visual astrology to decide orbs for planets, because none of the planets, when he did charts, had the same orb degree.
Mm.
And what he did was he went outside, and as soon as the sun set, he timed how long it took for each planet to be seen and turned that into his degrees for orbs.
Interesting.
Yeah, I thought it was fascinating when he told me about it. He didn't give me the calculations he used or anything, so I'm not sure for those. But that's how he used visual astrology.
Mm.
I think it was one of the best systems or approaches I could think of.
Oh, it's almost
Doing it instead of giving every planet the same actual degree, which is a lot of astrologers do.
Oh, it's almost a purely scientific way of doing it.
Yeah. More so, I would say. Yeah.
Mm.
Yes. So I wanted to throw that out right off the bat, because in other ways I'm going to contradict probably a lot of what some people think about visual astrology, and I am open to discussion on this. I'm not saying that everything I'm saying is correct or anything like that.
Right,
I don't like doing that. I will debate with people, try to figure out where their understanding comes from and mine, and hopefully we can meet somewhere in the middle.
Right.
Which would be nice.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So, as far as astrological physics is concerned, we have a solar system.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, let's start with the universe. You got the universe. We've broken that down. Okay. Into the spirit of the universe, the soul of the universe, okay, the logos and the nous, and breaking those into the four elements, which is creation theory of everything. Okay. As far as astrology is concerned, however, astrology is just concerned essentially with our solar system.
Mm.
Okay. The Earth, the planets around our Earth, and then essentially the planets in the beginning, however you want to look at that, of our solar system. Okay, they rule, it's called rulerships. They rule sign energy.
Mm.
Okay, so the sun rules Leo, the moon rules Cancer, and all the other planets rule two signs. Okay, and then you have your generational planets. Okay, and there's debate about whether they're actually planetary rulerships, because it's called personal rulerships, and those aren't the personal planets. The 7 inner planets are called the personal planets.
Right.
And those are generational because it takes them so long to move through the sign, they affect more like generations than they do your personal.
Mm-hmm.
So, throwing that aside, they do influence, and when you think about it also, they're also reflections of each other.
Right.
The personal planets that rule the same, that rule the signs, and then the generational planets, which I call influencers of the signs. However, certain planets have to do more. It's not a completely equal balance. Have to do more with one of the signs than the other, and so that makes them opposites, just like a reflection would be. That's why I call it like a reflective relationship between, let's say, Pluto and Mars.
Okay.
Okay. And Uranus and Saturn, and Neptune and Jupiter.
Mm.
Okay. So it's almost like that, because Neptune's, you would put Pisces first. where Jupiter, it's Sagittarius. Okay. As far as the relationship that they have. So it's almost like a reflective relationship that those particular planets have together, which is kind of interesting when you think about it.
Right, right.
Okay. And they're complete polarity opposites. So water, fire, earth, air. So they're not like an opposition in an aspect form.
Oh, okay.
Which would be the same gender. These are, planetary would be true reflected oppositions, interestingly enough.
Nice.
Yeah.
Right.
So you have these energies. Okay. The planets are what form the energies, essentially. Okay. Those are like your physical representations of how those energies come to exist in our solar system. And they create what, if you look at a chart, it looks like a belt, but it's not a belt. It's a sphere. Okay. That is separated into 30 degrees of energy. Okay. The first energy of the natal sign is Aries. Aries is also the first sign of the season spring. When astrology essentially was discovered, and people started asking questions and looking up, they saw stars in the sky. And those stars, a lot of the fixed ones, were put together in such a way that it looked like different, like animals. So Aries, it was like, oh, it's like a ram, Taurus is like a bull, and that's what they were named. Okay. However, that energy does not flow from the constellations of stars that are there. Those constellations were a visual marking of the sun's rotation, or I should say our rotation around the sun.
And time, yeah.
Yeah, and time, and the seasons, and what those differences meant.
Right,
because people, you could see it. That's how you know when to plant things. That's when you know how get up, go to bed. That's how we created clocks, how we created calendars, and how we track.
Well, it started as, I would say, as a time measure because people would notice the energy and notice it starts roughly when the sky is right here and then it's when it's right here.
Right, and then they would break it into 3 parts. The first thing they did was they separated it into the 4 elements. And they said, spring is moist and hot, so air. And then summer's hot and dry.
Hot and dry, yeah.
Fire. Fall is dry and cold because everything dries out, the leaves dry out, everything dries out and dies. Winter is cold and moist. I know a lot of people are like, but it gets so dry. The air gets dry. But anybody who has worn tennis shoes in the snow knows that it's not dry. It's very wet. The air, however, is dry. And if you live in a house and you're pumping dry heat out, everything is dried up. Because the atmosphere is too cold. Okay. And as the fall comes in, the dry cold, instead of putting humidity and moisture into the air, it's sucking it out of the air, throwing it essentially back into the ground. It's still there though. Okay. And then the snow falls down and kind of isolates it, or what's the word I'm looking for here? Not concentrate. Well, I guess you could say concentrates. Concentrates it in the form in snow, so it holds the moisture down.
Yeah, it's like a blanket that seals it in.
But that we would still consider winter water. Okay, and not just because of that, but also because moist is proper to spring, and air, where cold is proper to water and winter. Okay, so that's the first thing they did. And then they said, okay, we've got these 4 elements, essentially, that are in control of the cycles of the seasons. And then they divided those into 3 equal parts of 30 degrees. A beginning, a middle, and an end to what we now call the seasons. So again, the first part of spring initiates it, which would be the Aries. And then Taurus takes that and builds and creates the season. Okay, and then the next separation of 30 degrees would be Gemini, and what Gemini does is it completes the season and gets it ready to transform into the next season that's coming. Okay, and that's how all of the seasons work and rotate. Okay, and as they split it into these 30 degrees, when they looked up, again, they saw these fixed stars in the air that moved about the same amount into the next one. And that's when those were visual markings going, okay, so here's Aries, here's Taurus, here's Gemini, this is where Aries begins, this is where Taurus begins, this is where Gemini begins. Now, the problem occurs because there's a fluctuation on the Earth as it's spinning.
Yeah, we have
a wobble. We have a bit of a wobble.
We have a wobble.
So over time, that has thrown our visual markings out. And the reason that it's done that is because the only star in the solar system is our sun.
Right.
All of those other stars are outside of the solar system. They're not even within the zodiac. They're way out. So when our fluctuation happens, it doesn't affect the constellations at all, or the movement, or anything else. However, our solar system belt is about the energy. It's not about the constellation. And it's more about the wheel and the seasonal changes that happen, and the energetic changes that happen. So you can't go by when something enters a constellation that that's when this energy is, because that has nothing to do with it. And we'll just go by the moon phases. We know what the moon phases are. We know what a new moon means. It means that the sun and the moon are at exactly the same degree in the sky. Okay? And essentially in the same sign, not the constellation, that that sign energy. Whether or not the constellation's there, it doesn't matter. The energy hasn't shifted, because again, it's the outer layer of our solar system. Okay? So you cannot have a new moon in Aries if the sun is in Taurus. The only possible way you could do that is if one was like at 29 degrees and the other one was at 1 degree. And that would be that would be an orb. But I'm talking about direct on for the new moon. No possible way. When the new moon hits, it's because they're both at the same spot in the sky. And they can't be in the same spot in the sky if one's in one sign and one's in another. It's just not possible. That's a conjunction. It's not possible. Okay. So when we look at a new moon is oppositions. Okay. It's exactly the same thing. I'm sorry, the full moon are oppositions. So when we look at the full moon, sun's in a sign. The moon hits a sign for the new moon, then the moon moves. Right? Goes on its rotation and moves through every single sign until it comes to the oppositional sign that the sun's in. When they hit the same degree, that's the full moon. They have to be an opposing sign. Same thing. Doesn't matter where the constellation is. And we'll get into more of that later. But people are going to say, well, how far out of the constellation? I'm going to show you or explain to you how far apart the stars are.
Right.
And again, when we look up in the sky, what we see looks like a 2D picture almost of the sky up, and all of these stars that make up these constellations. However, when you actually go outside of just looking up, those stars are nowhere near each other. They're not floating in space somewhere as a constellation.
Right.
Okay. And I'm just going to talk about some of the stars in Aries right now, the Aries constellation. Okay. Hamal, the brightest star in this constellation, okay, it's 66 light years away. Which means any energy coming from that star is going to take 66 years to get here.
Right.
Okay. 66 years. Okay. Now, Mazartham, I believe that's how you say this, okay, is 164 light years away. So it's 100, that means it's 100 light years away from Hamal.
Right.
In the same constellation. They're nowhere near each other. And the Hamal star is actually closer to us than it is
to the
to the other star in its own constellation.
Right.
Okay. Araritus, okay, is 4,080 light years away, and that's another star in the constellation. Okay. There's another one that's 190 light years away. Okay. So none of these stars are anywhere near each other. So the Aries energy is not coming from these stars.
No, they're not.
It's not possible.
Near any of the other stars in the constellation. They're so far away from us, the energy could never possibly impact anyone during a lifetime.
Yeah, if something happened there today, right? Yeah, we wouldn't even know it.
Right.
But again, I don't want to disregard Vedic astrology or fixed star, people that work with the fixed stars. That's not what I'm trying to do. What I'm trying to do is say that those constellations are not a constellation unless you're here on Earth looking up in the sky.
Mm-hmm.
That's when they look like a constellation. That's it. And it's because we're closer to some of those stars than they are to each other. So they actually have nothing to do with each other.
Mm-hmm.
And again, they were just fixed points to look up at in the sky.
Right.
That's all they were when we decided. And the reason I bring that up is there are some people out there that thought that the last new moon we had was actually in Aries. Because the moon hadn't, if you looked up, the moon was still in the Aries constellation. But again, the constellation has nothing to do with any of that energy.
Right.
Okay. And again, our zodiac forming that sphere around, everything inside of it is affected by the zodiac signs. So the planets, as they move around, can move around into different signs. It doesn't affect the rulerships, but it affects what energy is actually being shifted through that planet into you at the time of your birth, for people thinking about their natal charts. Okay, and it's where in the zodiac that is, not where in the constellation that thing is. And I think there are people out there that don't realize that, and they don't realize the physics of astrology itself. If you're going to do astrology, though, that's the physics of it. That's how it works.
Again, yeah. Well, I think it's important to make the distinction between the zodiac and the signs and the constellations. They're not one and the same.
No, the constellations were just visual tracking points. That's it. That's all they were. And because of that wobbling of the Earth on its own axis, changed it. It doesn't change any of the other planets. We can track those. We know what degree those are at. They're not outside of it, so they're inside of it. If the fixed stars were inside, it wouldn't have had that effect. It's because they're outside that it's had that effect. Okay, now we come to the bigger questions that you and I kind of have talked about outside of this discussion. Okay, which is, as I brought this up to you, you said, well, if we know that the planetary energies, the sign energies, okay, are all connected to chakras on our body, okay, and that's what makes up our form, human form. How could we physically possibly leave the solar system and still be alive? Because there's no transiting, those planetary energies aren't working with us anymore, and yet all of our energy centers depend on those to function. So that was one thing I threw at you. And spiritually, sure. Astrally, yes. Because we don't rely on the physical form. The physical form's still here.
Right.
And all that energy is still interacting with us. The question is, physically, if we were in a spacecraft and we went to the outer points and we crossed through our zodiac sphere, would we exist?
The solar sphere. Would we be able to survive?
Yeah. Would we be able to survive? Could we possibly exist?
And that's a very interesting question. But, we can go a little bit smaller scale than that with simply with the moon and the effects that, because you're talking about the new and the full moon.
Yeah.
And the effects that it has and its connection to our brow chakra.
Yep.
Could we travel to another planet inside our solar system where the moon isn't there?
That's a good question. That is a good question. With that, I don't have an answer for that because it's still inside the zodiac sphere. So there's still energy going through the moon, but the moon isn't going to be able to connect with us the way that it would if we were on the Earth.
Right.
So, can the moon's energy find us on another planet? That's the question. And the answer is I have no clue. I don't have any idea how that would work because it's inside.
Or would it possibly shift through the other planets' moons?
I don't know. But that would be doubtful for me. That would be doubtful for me. It's a possibility, but some of those moons are, well, let's just say moons. There's not one.
Right.
There's more than one.
Yeah.
How would that work? They're going to split your brow into three? I mean, that's the question. Who?
I
don't know.
We don't know how. we don't physically have an answer for these questions. These are just questions that have been raised by the energetic physics of astrology at this point.
Yes. Yes.
We don't have an answer to, can we physically survive exiting our solar system and the solar sphere?
Right. Or
the zodiac.
Right.
We don't have an answer.
If it controls the energy, if it's right, if astrology is correct in its assumptions, and it controls those energies, can we leave?
Right.
Not to mention that our existence here relies on the seasonal changes.
Right.
They don't just affect our harvests and growing things, they affect every part of our being. It's a cycle that we've all gone through.
Well, see, we have all of that, but that's everything aside of the chakras. You have your energy,
if we leave that cycle, what's that going to do?
Right.
How will that affect us? Those are all crazy questions too that we have no answers for at this point.
Right.
But it's interesting to bring it up, because we haven't left the solar system.
Right.
Nobody has. I'm not sure how far out the furthest astronaut has gone. They have the moon landing. I know there's a lot of people that think it's fake, and I don't want to get into that. I don't want to get into that debate, because that's not what this is about.
Right.
But has anyone gone further than that and then come back? I don't know. The moon and its gravitational pull and all that. We know they've gone around it.
Just around the moon, yeah, as we say.
But I don't know how much further they've gone out. And then that goes to say, if we can't, there's no way we're going to be able to populate Mars.
Right.
Or a moon on Mars, or whatever they're thinking. How would that work?
Right.
And then, even if you could, the chart would be interesting, because you'd have to do a chart where Earth would take a place in the astrological chart, and Aries would be the center point of it. Or not Aries, but Mars would be the center point of it. That would be interesting too.
It would completely shift everything, but then, because it has a different orbital period.
Right.
Everything's going to move through the zodiac at a different rate. Everything is going to, with the signs look different. The energies are going to be the same.
Right.
We don't know what.
Right. Well, yeah. How's it going to look? Not just that, but what does a year become?
Right.
What's a year on Mars? Because it wouldn't be the same as a year on Earth.
Right.
And how would that affect life or our existence when you to switch from our seasonal cycle to Mars' seasonal cycle?
Right.
Would we be able to survive that shift? Because essentially our form is made up to survive in this system.
Right.
How do you take that and go to another system and try to survive it when your body's made for this one?
Right, right.
That's the strange part of it. And how would you grow anything on there without understanding how the seasons work there? Could you grow things there? And what could you grow there?
Right.
And what effect would having more than one moon have on
you
the
have
energy
that,
of that planet?
You have that, how does the plants that you take there, how is that going to change the energy of the planet that you're on? How is that going to do?
Right.
Because, herbs and plants are air energy.
Right.
How's that going to affect the planetary biosphere? How's that going to affect all sorts of things?
Well, right, but at this point, we don't even know what's there.
Right. Yeah.
Our form of plant life could be completely different organism on there.
Mm-hmm.
You don't know. And then again, would it sustain us? That's another question. Could we even be sustained by it? Because we're not from there.
Right.
It's not like being on Earth and then going to like Japan and eating their food. You're on a different planet. With stuff that is on that planet essentially made for that planet. And things of that planet and not things of this planet. So how does that even work? These are all interesting questions, but at the same time, you can go through meditations, visualizations, you can go spiritually, people have gone and visited places and, they go into the astral world.
Remote viewing, and you can astral travel,
right.
You can out-of-body.
Right, out-of-body experience and things like that. But as far as the physical body goes, is it possible to leave Earth? We know it's possible to leave the Earth, because we fly and we do all those things, and there's a space station, but again, low
Earth orbit.
Yeah, low Earth orbit, so still within the orbit of the Earth. But when you get past that, how sustainable is life?
Right.
And I don't know what the answer to that is. I would say probably you could sustain it until you get, and I don't know how far it would be, past the moon to some point. As soon as that connection's gone, I think there would be irreparable damage, if not death, from not having that connection. I don't see how that is sustainable. But again, I would love to debate this with somebody. It would be, that would be fun. And also the fixed stars. Of things that are that far out, not connected to each other, and how that works. Because visually, it's actually, as far as I've been told, you can calculate where the planets are better by fixed star movement than you can the way that Western astrology does it.
Okay. I would buy that.
Okay. But again, that's dealing with the planets. That's not dealing with star energy. That's dealing with the planets. And again, it's another tracking mode.
Right. Yeah, tracking modality. Yeah, for sure.
Tracking mode. Because again, you don't have to deal with the wobble. You don't have to deal with all that stuff. And the other planets don't have anything to do with our wobble. So that could be completely accurate. But it would be nice to talk to somebody who knows something about that. But again, for me, as far as the constellations go, I don't see how those are constellations. They're not constellations anywhere except here, where you or any sky you can just look up at and see a two-dimensional representation of light.
Right.
Because you can't tell how far away from each other they are. And then when you do determine how far away they are, it's unbelievable the amount of space between them. So there's no connection whatsoever between them, especially if you're talking about them and then us, because for a lot of them, we're closer to some of those stars than the other stars in the constellation are.
Right.
You know, and this is just Aries. This isn't even Taurus or any of the other ones. So,
well, that's, I mean, we were looking at we looked up Sagittarius. There's one star in there that's over 5,000 light years away.
Yeah. Well, right, but compared to the other ones, we don't know. But we would have to assume that it's going to be kind of like what happened with Aries.
Right.
Where none of them are relatively close to each other. And even if two are, wouldn't they all have to be for the constellation? Right. Because there are a lot of people that think that Aries energy comes from the constellation of Aries, Taurus energy comes from the constellation of Taurus, and it has absolutely nothing to do with that. Physics-wise, the energy is nothing to do with the constellations. The constellations were just markers to know when certain energy was happening,
right? So
that you could follow it.
As a timepiece.
Yeah. And look up at it.
Yeah.
Things of that nature. And again, I think most people don't realize that there are no stars in the solar system except the sun.
Right.
Galaxy, yes. Solar system, no. This is it.
Right.
And all the energy that's reflected in our solar system is reflected off our sun. So all the planets.
They reflect the sun.
Yeah, the sun is the source of the light, and then kind of comes down and splits up from there, and is reflected on all of them.
Right.
At certain times, which is interesting, but I wanted to make that, or get that out there, so that people can have a better understanding of the physics of astrology.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
When it comes to these kind of things. Otherwise, you're going to have people that have no idea. And they start thinking that, like I said, there's a full moon in Aries when it's not physically possible. Because you can't have a new moon with the sun and the moon in different signs. It's just not possible.
Right.
Because they have to be exactly the same degree. That's the issue with it. Same thing with the opposition when it's a full moon.
Right.
It has to be. Yeah. And that's that wobbling of the Earth.
Yeah, that fun
that has caused
axial precession, it's called.
Yeah, and that's what's caused the problem in the first place. And again, but that's because it is a visual representation.
Right.
The stars are not actually in our sky. You just see the light from them.
Right.
But they're not actually in our solar system sky. The planets are. Chiron, we have asteroids.
Right.
But we don't have any stars other than the sun that exist here. But again, I would love to sit down and debate somebody, or not even debate, just learn.
Yeah.
To see what they have to say, because,
just to talk to. I mean, Vedic astrology is not something that I've ever personally looked into.
I'd look into it a little bit. The problem is that trying to learn two completely different systems like that can be a little difficult, especially with everything else that, the physics aspect that I get into.
Right.
There's only so much time in a day to spend looking at all this stuff.
Right.
But I would like to. I would love to talk to somebody who's done research into it, who can kind of explain their theories for the fixed stars.
Right.
And things. And the constellations. Okay. And if somebody out there has a different point of view, who can explain how you can have a new moon in two different signs, I would be more than willing to listen to them too. Just to see if I can work the math and work the logic behind it.
Right.
To make sure that there's some kind of computation that can help define it and not just because I think so. I don't want those debates. I want to debate, okay, how?
Right.
Will this conform to this?
How does this work? How does
right.
all of this tie in together?
Right.
You know,
right.
Those are some of the funnest discussions that I've had with people.
Yeah, I mean, and you know, as long as your ego doesn't get in the way, you
right.
should be fine with being able to talk to them. It doesn't mean that you're not going to counter something that they say with something that you've studied.
Oh, no,
well, how does that work with this and this, that, and the other thing? But you know,
it's part of critical thinking.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, as long as you can critically think and debate and not argue,
right?
It's fine.
Right, absolutely.
Because then everybody can learn something. Otherwise, there's no point.
Right.
Because an argument just means that you're not listening. You're not open to anything they're saying. You've already made up your mind before you walked in the room, and it's over.
Right.
You know. But debate, no. Debate means your point of view. You have to listen to somebody else's point of view, and either counter it or counter your own reasoning and logic, and come back to something. And that's, I'd say maybe not debate, but discussion.
Discussion is
a better word. I'd like to discuss it with somebody.
The better word.
Yeah, the way that it used to be done, where they would discuss things even if they didn't agree.
Right. Well, I mean, that's what all the old time philosophers used to do. And
well, that's what the ones that we generally, the ones that we like, yeah. You know, because I mean, if you think about it, they killed Socrates.
I mean, well, Socrates was a special case because he would have these debates with people, but he'd make them feel stupid.
Yeah, he was an instigator. I'll give you that. Yes, he did. Yes, he did do that. Yes. When you read the Republic, you know, he did go out of his way to make people look stupid. You know, even though he would say that's not what I'm doing, then he would do it. You know, and he would do it publicly, which was not probably the best way to do it.
Right.
And some of that was word play. He would use word play to do it.
Right.
You know, by setting up things, saying, well, if this is this, and you agree to that, correct? And they would say yes. He was like, then how do you explain this when he did something else? And they go, oh, maybe that's wrong. He's like, but you just agreed to it. And that's the part that makes people look stupid. If you didn't do that in the first place and went, well, a lot of people believe this means this. It doesn't. It can't mean this. That would open up discussion for somebody to say, okay, but what if we did that? What if you think about it this way? But he didn't do that.
Mm-hmm.
He would make them agree with a certain concept and then destroy the concept right after he had them agree with it. And it's like, yeah, that's not going to get you invited to Christmas dinner. You know, that's going to get you thrown out of the house.
Yes, that'll get you kicked out real quick.
Or poisoned, is for what happened to Socrates.
Right.
And poisoned. So, yeah. But I would love to have a discussion, again, an open discussion with somebody who knows more about it, because I know a little bit about Vedic astrology,
right,
but not enough.
And that's any of the topics that we talk about.
Yeah,
we would love to have discussions with any of you about anything that we discuss.
Yeah. I'm open to it. My whole thing is I'm more like I'm a facilitator.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I like to bring people in. And then say, okay, or research what somebody else has done and take from it what makes sense.
Right.
Okay. And in discussions with people, that's how you learn. There were things that, 5-10 years ago that I thought that I've come to find out, no.
Mm-hmm.
I was mistaken, misinformed, and sometimes I was misinformed by my own mental processes. And not because somebody gave me misinformation, but I researched something and
the logical leaps.
The logical path that I took wasn't the logical path of the writer.
Mm.
And then all of a sudden you come back and go, wait a minute, that doesn't work. Oops. And you got to backtrack, figure out where you made a mistake. But again, that the lessons you learn there set you up for expanding what you've already learned.
Right.
And that's the best part. And it takes different areas. When I first talked to you about numbers, with your math background.
Right.
I had ideas, I had theories. The stuff you came out with allowed me to take the theory and go, oh wow, what if we did this with it?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And you had never looked at it from my point of view.
Right. I had never looked at it.
And I didn't know the terms, and I didn't know the theory, a lot of those theories.
Mm.
And when you started opening me up to that, it allowed me to go, oh, this is why this works this way. And then it was like, well, this doesn't actually work this way. This works this way. And when you look at it this way, though, it connects all this other stuff now. And it's like, that's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
But I could have never done that.
Right, right.
Without other people's knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's not, oh, look at me, I know all this stuff. No, that's not, that's nothing. I don't have all this knowledge. I don't. Almost everything I talk about, there's a few things, but most of the stuff that I talk about came from other sources. It didn't come from me. Other people thought of it. And I just took it and I just expanded on it. But I could have never done anything if they hadn't done that.
You expanded, you put things together, you
facilitated.
Collated and facilitated. Then you bring in other like minds or that are searching or anything like that, like myself.
Right. With a completely different background. And that's the important part of this. Is getting that, because if nobody comments, and I'll just say that because nobody comments. But if you guys don't comment, I don't know what you guys want. And I don't know what you can add to this.
Mm-hmm.
And if there's something that I'm talking about that you don't agree with, open me up to it. Let's discuss it and see where it goes. Maybe I'm wrong about things. I don't mind being wrong about things. I mind being wrong about things if I don't know I'm wrong about things.
Right, right.
That's what I don't like. But if there's a different avenue, bring it up. It doesn't mean that every comment we can jump into and say, hey, let's talk about them all, or else all we're doing is comments. But the most popular ones, let's put it that way, we can tackle and see where it goes.
Absolutely. And that's been some of the funnest off the handle conversations that we have, which is part of why we're doing Spirit Talk now. I've been from just ideas that were like, hey, what about this?
Yeah. Yeah, like when we get into like warp drive and stuff like that, yeah. It's like, what? How's that metaphysical? Well, it is. There's a tie in there. But yes, that's where a lot of it comes from. Or just a question. That I've never, or that, like if a student comes to me with a question I never thought of, it gives me a chance to think about it.
Right.
And expound on it. And then work with the people on it.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. That's great. Otherwise, it's just stuff rolling around in my head, and that's where this needs to go.
Right, right.
And this needs to flow through a lot of people.
Well, that was, that's just
completely different background.
One of the first conversations we had prior to me actually beginning to work with you and taking this journey myself. When I asked you about the unconscious and conscious and how you broke it down.
Oh, as far as the soul of the universe is concerned?
Yeah.
Is the soul of the universe conscious or unconscious?
Yeah.
And I was like, well, yes. I was like, what? But that's how it turned out. But that's not how it started. It started with, let's think about that. And then I went astrological and kind of broke it down to the nadir and midheaven, and the fact that at that time, or not just that time, but soul of the world was the feminine aspect, so water, earth has to it. 10th house is Capricorn, it's earth, that's conscious. 4th house is water, Cancer, that's unconscious. So they're both feminine, so yes. Right? And that's where, we got into the consolidation. Mm-hmm. Consolidated forms of energy are conscious of themselves, like we talked about the chair and the floor, so that they know that they're not a part of each other.
Mm-hmm.
And that would be the earth aspect, consciousness. The unconscious aspect is the water aspect of it. The part that isn't consolidated together. It's just out there. That's unconscious.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where we came to, the conclusion, yes. It's both. But again, before you asked that question, I hadn't really ever thought about that or broke it down like that.
Mm-hmm.
But it was that. It was like, hey, wait a minute. Boom. Let's look and see where this goes. If it goes anywhere. Because sometimes there's no answer. There's not enough information known. And then it takes looking into it. Or finding somebody who knows it.
Not
saying,
not enough information. It's not something that we've thought of before.
Right.
There's topics that cross my plate that you haven't heard of. I'll bring them to you, and we look into them and see if there's a tie-in.
Exactly.
And how we can use them.
Yeah. Well, cymatics was one of those.
Cymatics was one.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of that is big one now is that the magnetic field from the heart.
Yeah, the magnetic field from the heart. Yep.
And how that ties into the aura and the Venus hub.
Right. The Venus hub. Yeah. Well, the Venus hub, and it also the Venus hub of the actual heart, the muscle. When we talk about like the endocrine glands, and I know it's a muscle, not an endocrine gland, but it controls hormones just like all the endocrine glands do, so it's part of that system. And it's the hub for that entire system, essentially. And it's ruled by Venus. The heart chakra ruled by Pluto, and I've had a lot of opposition to that one. But the tie-in with that magnetic field going on is that magnetic field is Scorpio, and that's Pluto. That's not Venus.
Right.
Okay, and that's kind of what makes Venus, because she's so tied to the heart. Okay, the planet itself is associated with water, even though it rules air and earth. It is associated with water, and that's the tie-in for it. Is that one, because that Scorpio and that heart chakra and that Pluto energy and Scorpio primarily is what takes Venus and submerges her in water. And that emotion, and it's like, whoa, okay. Now, knew there was a tie-in, but before you brought up the whole magnetic field radiating from the heart, I couldn't have had this discussion with anybody.
Right.
I would have just had to say, well, yeah, it is. Well, how? I haven't looked. Yeah, I don't know. And again, bringing that in allows you to expand on those things. Okay? And the auric field, but then the aura itself is expanded energy, which is Jupiter. So there's a Jupiter tie-in.
Right.
With that at the same time, and it's like, okay, we've got another crossover. Interesting.
Well, again,
fixed energy, that brings in all the mutable, water and fire.
But that you have the expansion from Jupiter, but then you have a secondary magnetic field also generated from your brain and the pineal gland.
Yeah, the pineal gland. But again, when you bring him back, it brings in Cancer.
Right.
So initiating water.
Yeah.
Then we have creation.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Creating, which is Scorpio.
Right.
Creating the field. Then the mutable aspect of that is Pisces. So again, we just tied it back into Jupiter. And then fire expands, correct?
Right.
Yeah. And that's Sagittarius, which is also Jupiter. So that's your field.
Yeah.
And then you have everything tied into the field. It's cardinal fixed, and mutable. And it's all the elements. And it's ridiculous how that works. You're like, okay, so everything's here.
Hi.
Because you have air with Libra and Venus.
Right.
And that's the I guess the awesome part of it. I guess you should say. That's what makes
it makes it fascinating, and and the other thing that it makes, and why we want discussion with you guys as much as we do, is this stuff that we're doing is never ending. It's always going to be expanding. There's going to be new avenues, new roads to look into, new scientific discoveries to check into, new metaphysical ideas to toy around with, possibly. The possibility is endless.
Yeah. It's a whole field of science. And nobody is over every field of science. It's
Right,
not possible.
Well, it's.
But we're just in the beginning of this one.
Mhm.
I mean, it's not even the beginning of this one. The astrology's been around forever. This direction of it, though,
Mhm.
that's what we're in the beginning of. That's the exciting part. That's what makes this all exciting. And then expanding that out.
Right.
You know, because you also have the Aries aspect
Mhm.
of initiating fire, drive, initiating, and that's again expanding out
Mhm.
that energy. And all of that energy, you know, the aura is all color, and all color comes from the source is the sun.
Fire.
That's
yeah.
Leo.
Yeah.
That's, you know, that just got factored in too. So the only thing essentially that is air and earth, except we have Taurus because of Venus, right?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, and then of course that brings in the two hubs, the throat chakra
And the root.
and the root chakra, because that brings in Saturn, and that brings in Capricorn, and that brings in Aquarius, and this brings in Gemini, and it brings in Virgo.
Mhm.
So now we took the entire zodiac and broke it into how the aura works
Yeah.
and the auric field, and that's, you know, through the chakra. So that was something we hadn't delved into that way. We hadn't separated it all out. And that
We
was
had
just
we
like the whole
had
thing
we
together.
we had a general idea and a functional understanding of how it
Works.
works. We couldn't fully explain it
Right, the field out, but we just did. So.
until the magnetic fields.
Yeah. And
And then it's
conceptualized it.
relatively new scientific.
Right. Right. But then we didn't do that until just like 2 minutes ago.
Right. Right.
And then it got conceptualized,
Right.
you know, and there's that one. So that's fun. But, well, that's what I mean though. That's what this is all about.
Mhm.
You know, that's the fun part. It's the interaction
Right. Absolutely.
with other people. You know, that's where it gets really fun.
Absolutely.
But I think we're good with this one.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us, and we do look forward to seeing you next time. Remember to like and subscribe. Thank you.